to save the world from a lamentable fate, and in so doing becoming its greatest enemy, one would need the coldest blood and an unshakable will of iron. This is the story of Giliath Osborne. Giliath Osborne was birthed to a commoner family from the north of Erebonia, a relatively wealthy family but commoners nonetheless. Regardless, that was not a detriment, and for 13 years of his adolescence, Osborne enjoyed a comfortable life with his parents. Unfortunately, this would not last, and in a first of many instances that would plague his existence, an avalanche claimed his family while Osborne himself barely survived. By chance, the nearby Baron of Emir was a friend of Osborne's parents, and realising the plight of the young teenager, decided to adopt him into the Schwarzer household. It's at this time that Osborne meets a young boy who would quickly warm up to his adoptive brother. For the following 4 years, Osborne would become a role model for Theo Schwarzer, who saw the older boy even then as a paragon of kindness and respect, something that the future Baron would take well into his adult life. Over this period, Osborne lived a sheltered and comfortable life despite the harrowing experiences of his past, and at the age of 17 he decided to enroll at Thor's Military Academy, an esteemed educational institution founded by the father of the Renaissance Emperor Dracos, and an environment which forged youth into the foundation for Erebonia's future. Upon graduation, Osborne joined the Imperial Army, and excelled in areas of physical and logical capability while also boasting unprecedented leadership traits. Mastering the 100 form military style and demonstrating his ability on many occasions, it wasn't long until the General of the Army, Van Dyke, noticed the innate talent of Osborne and thus took him directly under his wing. Throughout that time, Osborne would continue to eclipse his peers, and for all intents it appears that his life was destined to be tied to the military, until a fateful day at the age of 35. In an unassuming garrison town, Osborne stumbled upon a woman who captivated him, and little did he know that this woman would become his wife. Though Osborne was conscious of the age gap between them and thus chose not to approach her, it was his superior in Van Dyke who realised the officer's infatuation, and acting as a matchmaker he brought the two together. It wasn't long after that Osborne and Kasia created a loving home where they brought a young boy into the world in 1187 of the Septian calendar, giving him the name Reen. As if the situation couldn't be more perfect, Osborne was promoted to Brigadier General soon after, and for anyone looking at this budding family, it appeared that Osborne's life was set. But in a twist of fate, it's at this time he started hearing a voice in his mind. A voice that Osborne chose to keep secret from all those around him. Though Osborne's swift promotions through the ranks of the Imperial Army were based on hard work and merit, there were those in the army who were intimidated and envious of his natural ability, none more so than the noble generals. And it was this insecurity that would spur one of the worst tragedies in Zemurian history, so reprehensible in fact that it would be wiped from the annals themselves. Spearheaded by the commander of the 13th Armoured Division, Rudolf Arundel, him and a select group of other nobles decided that they needed something to gain favour within the army, lest they continue to be outshone by commoners like Osborne. And as if manipulated by some unseen force, they chose to go down the darkest path to achieve it, feeling that declaring war on their southern neighbours, the Kingdom of Laberl, to be the most efficient method. But there were two problems. First of all, they needed a spark to set the war in motion, and second, it appeared that their plan had been discovered. Osborne had caught wind of the scheme, reprimanding his fellow officers for what they were attempting to do, and for all intents this should have ended the proceedings, for any sane group of individuals would abandon such a foolhardy idea for fear of being caught. But the people of Erebonia were known for doing some of the most foolish things. In an evening of early April 1192 of the Septian calendar, Jaegers hired by the nobles burned down Osborne's home on the outskirts of Heimdall, and his wife and child are caught in the blaze. As Osborne rushes to his family's aid, he realises that he is too late, witnessing Kasia's body outside the home and his 5-year-old son's heart impaled with debris. In a fit of desperation, Osborne pleads to goddess and demon alike to help him.
Helios, please! Someone answer me! Goddess or fiend, I don't care! I'll do anything. Take me instead if you must. Just please! Spare our son's life!
and as if preordained, something does answer Osborne. But to say it was a mere demon was a sore understatement. With the voice manifesting into a humanoid form, a silhouette of black appears before the man, stating that it will save his son if he becomes its awakener. And with this revelation, Osborne finally realizes what has happened. This voice, this curse, was the source of strife, the source of his loss. But driven into a corner, he had no choice but to comply. Abandoning mind and body to the being known as Ishmelga, Osborne becomes the Ebon Awakener and transplants his heart afflicted with the curse to his son so that he may live. This pact as an Awakener also makes Osborne an immortal, someone compulsorily kept alive by fate itself to serve in an ancient ritual. 3 days after this event, the Erebonian Empire declares war on the Kingdom of Liberl, only coming to a standstill because of the brilliance of Cassius Bright and the innovation of Albert Russell. During this period of tumult, Osborne disappears for 3 months, and comes into contact with a certain group calling themselves the Society of Ouroboros, a group that he would use for his own means in the future. However, he also knew that he had to fight back against the nobility, in particular the 4 great houses. As much as it pained him to admit it, he couldn't do that while looking after his son, so he calls a trusted friend in a familiar northern hot spring town, the now head of the Schwarzer barony, Teo, imploring him to take the child and to keep all events up to this point a secret from him, revealing the location where he could be found. Leaving the child with little more than a few words of prayer in the snow, he returns to the army with renewed fervour. With the blessing of Emperor Eugent III, who he is introduced to by Van Dyke, he is tasked with ending the war and discovering the truth of Hamel, something that Osborne does with frightening efficiency. No less than 10 days had passed since his return to the army had an armistice been signed between Liberl and Erebonia, effectively ending the war on the 100th day. Not long after this, Osborne discovers the truth of the tragedy of Hamel, and the perpetrators, including Rudolf Arundel, are sentenced to death in a secret court-martial hearing. For his services, Osborne is rewarded for his efforts, becoming the first commoner-born Chancellor in 1193 of the Septian calendar. In the years following his promotion, Osborne set forth expanding the influence of Erebonia over its surroundings, investing heavily into the rail network and wresting influence away from the nobles. Naturally, these actions grated on the nobility, especially the 4 great houses who were beginning to fear Osborne, and some even took to intimidating the Chancellor through 4 higher Jaeger Corps. Of course though, Osborne would not be blindsided again, and any who would stand in his way he would crush without a second thought. If anything, these attempts on his life were exactly what he hoped for, as the internal strife within Erebonia would eventually reach a fevered pitch, a point at which he could crush the nobility once and for all. Using his deductive ability, he was even able to establish the mastermind behind the attack of Arngarn, one such attempt on his life. Visiting a young noble who just so happened to be practicing falconry with his old friend Teo at the time, he questions the intentions of the eldest son of Alborea, and is amused by the answers given to him. It's clear that this impression is mutual, with Rufus Alborea pledging his support to Osborne and becoming the first of his Ironbloods, a group of gifted individuals handpicked by the Chancellor himself, that would grow steadily in number over time, and the ones who would be instrumental in what was to follow. Over the years, Osborne would utilise morally questionable tactics to expand the territory of Erebonia, drawing Durai into the Empire in 1196 of the Septian calendar after its economic situation had conveniently deteriorated due to a bombing of the railway that linked it to the state. His ruthless methodology would take its most telling form yet in 1202 of the Septian calendar, where with the assistance of Ouroboros he was able to create weaponry that had no dependence on orbal energy. This was all in preparation for the climax of the so-called Gospel Plan, which saw the reappearance of the fabled Liberarch and the orbal shutdown phenomenon that followed it, rendering Liberl and some parts of Erebonia without energy. With the excuse of encroachment on the well-being of Erebonian citizens, Osborne puts his plan into motion, sending Zex Vander along with a battalion of steam tanks to offer aid to Liberl. Unfortunately for Osborne though, this attempt at feigned assistance is thwarted by the eldest prince of the imperial family, Olivert, and the Brigadier General of Liberl's army, Cassius Bright. And though this attempt may have ended in failure, it was not too damaging on Osborne's greater designs. Immediately following the end of the Liberl incident, Osborne breaks contact with Ouroboros, and manages to ensnare one of their 13 factories under his control in secret. In the spring of 1203 of the Septian calendar, he continues to exert his influence and arrives unannounced to Grandsale Castle to offer a political alliance with Olivert, a man he sees as his greatest rival. Though Olivert can agree with the sentiments of Osborne, that being the nobility eventually bringing ruin to Erebonia, he can't find it within himself to ally with the Chancellor, refusing his offer and throwing roses at him in a show of defiance aboard the newly assembled Arsail. Naturally, this does not sway Osborne, and his plans continue into the year 1204 of the Septian calendar, where he hears that Olivert has once again attempted to challenge his authority by creating a so-called social experiment within Thor's military academy for the coming year. As the months pass, Osborne finally meets this group in Valflame Palace following the thwarted kidnapping of Princess Alfin by the Imperial Liberation Front. Known as Class 7, he is surprised to witness a familiar face among them, someone with the gentle features of his deceased wife, and a boy who he left behind in the snow 12 years ago. He had finally reunited with Reen. A reunion with their long-absent son may be cool for celebration for many parents, but not for Osborne, who chose to keep the truth a secret until the time was right. Gradually moving all pieces into position, he demonstrates the intimidating aura of Erebonia once again at the West Zemuria Trade Conference, challenging the resolve of Crossbell's heroes, and even enlisting the Red Constellation to counter a planned attack by the Imperial Liberation Front. With this situation ending in a declaration of independence by Diete Croix and the spawning of an ancient power long thought lost, the Chancellor swiftly reacts, manufacturing a situation that the nobility simply can't refuse. And in a national address, he is shot through the heart by the leader of the Imperial Liberation Front, Crow Armbrust, the grandson of the former mayor of Jirai who he had outwitted 8 years ago. And for all those watching or listening, it was as if the intimidating presence of Osborne had dissipated like the flesh from his chest. But of course, how can you shoot something that never existed in the first place? Osborne had now laid the perfect foundation to watch the oncoming civil war from the background, utilising the head of the Ironbloods as a mole who would break the noble faction from the inside, and loaning a certain weapon to aid Rufus in his mission. As the war eventually reaches its climax, resulting in the restraining of Duke Cayenne and thereby the loss of the noble faction, Osborne once again appears in front of a stunned group, revealing that he had orchestrated everything, including the results of the war. With his greatest thorn in the nobility crushed, he usurps Ouroboros' phantasmal blaze plan for his own, declares the allegiance of the Black Workshop, and reveals the truth to his son Reen, the awakener of the Ashen Knight who he now blackmails into becoming a national hero and figurehead, someone subservient to the Imperial government. With another great hurdle cleared, Osborne was now free to continue unopposed in bringing about his true goal. For the next 2 years, Osborne worked to prepare the final conditions for his ultimate plan. In 1205 of the Septian calendar, he manages to draw both Crossbell and Northumbria into the Empire, effectively ensuring that Ouroboros could no longer hide in the shadows, and also expanding Erebonia's power for one final conflict, a battle that would determine the fate of the world. With the Ashen Chevalier at his beck and call, events continue to run their course, and Heimdall manages to escape calamity at the claws of an ancient evil. In the following celebrations, Osborne is unsurprised when the destiny predicted by the Black Records confronts him and the Emperor in Valflame Palace, witnessing the sacrifice triggering the appearance of the Graal of Erebos. Moving swiftly to the Graal with his servant in Black Alberic, the head of the Black Workshop, Osborne is eventually confronted by his son in the depths, who he has since divulged the realities of his past to. Feeling that victory is all but assured, Osborne reveals what his true intentions are, or at least what they appear to be on the surface. Those motivations are to reunite the so-called Great One by bringing about the Great Twilight as its catalyst, and to drown the world in conflict so that humanity could advance to even greater heights through endless strife. And for all intents, these sound like the ramblings of a madman. But of course, Osborne is not the true master in this instance. With the nameless holy beast destroyed and the great twilight enveloping the land, Osborne's crushing darkness, a taint that had afflicted him for over 14 years, finally manifests to all present, in the form of the Ebon Knight Ishmelga, strongest of the 7 fragments. With the ultimate stage nearing completion, Reen, who has since been consumed by the curse, is imprisoned in the Black Workshop in preparation for the coming rivalry of the Seven, and Osborne, using Ash's attempted assassination of the Emperor as kindling, declares Operation Jormungand to the Peoples, a grand military operation that eventually would end with the invasion of the Calvard Republic. The end of this wretched fairy tale was close at hand. Osborne leaves the plans on the surface under the care of Rufus and Van Dyke, who Osborne had tasked with jurisdiction of the army. The Chancellor himself, with Divine Knight weighing over him, would watch on from the shadows until the time was right. Ishmelga, who believed it had Osborne under its complete control, felt assuredly confident in its coming victory in the rivalry of the Seven, despite the escape of the Ashen Awakener from the workshop. The moment at which it would finally become the Great One was close at hand, and how could it possibly lose with the strength of the reincarnated Drycles as its Awakener? And at least in its eyes, everything was going to plan. Rivalries begin to occur all over the land between the other Divine Knights, and the war seems all but inevitable. The greatest creation of the gnomes in Tuatha De Danann is brought to the plane of humanity to act as the stage for the final rivalry, and within its depths, Knight and Awakener await the coming duel, which is answered by the heroes of Class 7. Realising that those present now know the truth of the curse, Osborne, or in a sense the reincarnated Drycles, feels no need to hide anything anymore, and calls on Valamar as his former Awakener, thanking him for watching over his son, who he feels he can now express his suppressed affection to at the end of the world. With one final push, he implores Reen and his companions to fight him with all they have to set the stage for the final rivalry. Father and son draw their blades and clash in the ultimate battle to decide the fate of the world. With the preparations for the rivalry set, Ishmelga steps forward to face Valamar and Ordine, and in its desire for the ultimate power, it had made a fatal error, something that Osborne had waited 14 years to execute. Rivalries can only occur in the throes of conflict, and the final bout would require an even greater scale of strife and bloodshed to meet the required conditions, lest the ritual become corrupted in a sense. The Great War resulting from Operation Jormungand would in theory provide sustenance for the ritual, as the malice would be siphoned to the fortress. Ishmelga's oversight, though, came from the one place it never expected it, from Osborne himself. Despite being burdened and surrounded by the darkness of Ishmelga, the very thought form of malice and strife, the Chancellor had managed to resist it for 14 years, creating this one opportunity to rid Erebonia of its curse once and for all. He never cared for bringing the world to ruin, he only wanted to rid it of its greatest sickness, by becoming the enemy of the world and drawing heroes from all around the continent to stop him. All Osborne had to do in his final moments was to provide the opportunity for them, by drawing Ishmelga to the plane of humanity at the climax of the rivalries. Osborne had intentionally started the final bout early, effectively corrupting the components for the Great One's rebirth. Preying on Ishmelga's lust for power, the Ebon Knight is defeated by Valamar after one final heartfelt moment between Osborne and Reen, with the Chancellor believing his purpose has now been served. With the Ebon Knight's defeat, Osborne's soul is freed from Ishmelga's influence, whose essence assimilates into his son along with his own. And though Reen is almost overcome by the darkness that Osborne resisted for so long, he pushes his son to fight back with the innate strength only an Osborne would have, drawing on the bonds he has forged during his life to rip the thoughts form of Ishmelga from his soul and imprison it on the plane of humanity to be destroyed. And as fate would have it, the world would live another day. The vessel of Ishmelga is destroyed, and it's only fitting that the son surpasses his father, by destroying what he could not. Before he departs the world of the living though, Osborne is thankful to have one last special conversation with Reen, for this is different. This is a moment as father and son in the truest sense of the word. The story of Giliath Osborne is bittersweet, for many in Zemuria will not remember him as a hero. They will remember him as one of its greatest enemies. But for those few who recognised his unbreakable will, for those few who realised his burden, and for those few who saw him overcome it for the future of the world, his actions will never be forgotten.